I wrote one anonymous Yelp review after my ex cheated on me. It went viral. His restaurant shut down. A year later, my new boss turned out to be his sister. I never meant for it to go that far. It started as a drunk decision on a Wednesday night. The kind of night where the world feels like it's sitting on your chest and you can't decide whether to scream or laugh or throw your phone into the ocean. I was sitting in my tiny Charleston apartment, surrounded by half-eaten takeout and the smell of cheap wine, when I opened Yelp and typed in the name of his restaurant, the Mason Table. It had 5 stars, glowing like a perfect life like him, and I used to look on Instagram before everything fell apart. The pictures were all artful plating and smiling couples and captions about honest food made with heart. And I remember laughing out loud because I'd seen him kiss someone else behind that same kitchen door less than a week before that review. I didn't plan it. I swear I didn't. I just started typing, and the words poured out like a wound that finally got tired of staying quiet. I wrote about the arrogance, the fake charm, the way he'd flirt with every waitress, and the fact that I once found lipstick on his chef jacket. That wasn't mine. I didn't name names, but I didn't have to. Charleston's food scene was small. Everyone knew him. Everyone read Yelp. I hit post at 12:03 a.m. and stared at the screen like I just detonated something, and in a way, I had. The next morning, the notifications started coming in. Texts from friends, screenshots from strangers, people sharing it on foodie forums. The title said, "1 star for the chef who broke my heart," and apparently that was all it took. The review spread faster than gossip in a southern brunch line within 24 hours. The Mason Table went from being fully booked for months to half empty by the weekend within a week. The local paper picked up the story, "Viral Yelp Scandal in Charleston," they called it. By Monday, I saw a handwritten sign on the door, "Closed for maintenance," but we all knew what that meant. I should have felt vindicated, but all I felt was hollow, like I'd burned down a house I once lived in just to prove it could burn. I deleted the Yelp app 2 days later and promised myself I'd never talk about it again until a year later when I walked into my new job and heard the same last name again. Have you ever done something out of heartbreak that felt good for a second and then instantly made you regret it? It had been a year since that night, the night I let anger turn into pixels, and pixels turn into ruin. And by the time the calendar flipped over, I'd convinced myself that what I did was just survival, because that's what heartbreak does. It tricks you into believing destruction is therapy. So when I saw the job posting for a new restaurant opening downtown, I didn't think twice. The place was called the Harbor Light, modern southern menu rooftop bar, views of the water, a dream job for someone like me who'd spent the last few years bouncing between coffee shops and catering gigs. I needed a fresh start, and this one felt like it had my name written all over it. I still remember the morning of the interview, the Charleston air thick with humidity and possibility. I wore the only blazer that still made me feel like I had my life together, the one that didn't smell like regret or wine. I walked in rehearsing my lines, confident, polite, experienced, ready to be someone new, someone clean. The hostess smiled and led me toward the back office, and that's when I saw her sitting behind the desk scrolling through a tablet. Her hair perfectly coiled, her posture sharp, like someone who'd never had to raise her voice to be taken seriously. She looked up and smiled. "You must be Leah." "Right. I'm Harper Mason, owner and executive manager." Mason. The name hit me like cold water, and for a second I forgot how to breathe. Mason, as in the Mason Table. Mason, as in the restaurant I'd torched. Mason, as in his last name. She was his sister, of course. She didn't know me. I'd only met her twice in passing back then. Polite small talk at the restaurant, opening a handshake, a compliment about the wine list. She had no reason to remember me, and every reason not to associate me with the anonymous review that had turned her brother's dream into ashes. I forced a smile. "Yes, nice to meet you, Harper. Thank you for seeing me." She nodded, friendly but focused. "I read your resume. Impressive background, and we're really looking for people who understand both front and back of house culture. Someone who gets how food and emotion connect. I think you could be perfect here." Perfect. The word tasted like irony, but I smiled. Anyway, answered her questions, talked about service and hospitality and teamwork, all the while feeling the weight of her last name pressing down on me like a secret begging to be heard. By the end, she said, "We'll be in touch soon," and I walked out into the Charleston sun with my heart beating too fast, because if she hired me, I'd be walking straight into the life I'd once set on fire. Would you take a dream job if you knew your new boss had every reason to hate you, but didn't know it yet? The day I got the job offer, I stared at the email for a full 5 minutes before opening it, afraid the words might change. If I blinked, Harper had written, "We'd love to have you on the team. Welcome to the Harbor Light," and I swear I could feel my past laughing at me somewhere because the universe has a dark sense of humor. I told myself it didn't matter that Mason was just a common last name, that she probably never talked about her brother, that what I'd done was so buried under internet noise by now, it couldn't possibly crawl back up. But the truth was, every time I thought about it, my stomach twisted like guilt had claws. The first day felt like walking into a new version of myself. Everything smelled of lemon oil and fresh paint. The kitchen buzzed with nervous energy, the sound of knives on cutting boards like a steady heartbeat, the kind of place built for second chances and quiet ambition. Harper moved through the space like gravity, calm and commanding. She greeted everyone by name, complimented plating, adjusted the lighting, asked about families. She was the kind of boss everyone wanted to impress, and that somehow made it worse. I could feel the weight of what I'd done hiding behind every compliment she gave me, every kind glance she offered, like she was unknowingly trusting someone who had once broken her blood's world apart. My station was near the pass, where servers picked up plates under the warm lights. I kept my head down, tried to focus on the rhythm of service, ticket and plate. Out, smile, repeat. But there were ghosts everywhere, the same kind of copper pans, the same style of chalkboard menu, even the music faint jazz that her brother used to play during prep at the Mason Table. And then I saw it on the wall behind the bar, framed like art, a black and white photo of a young man holding a pan in mid-flip. The caption underneath read, "For those who cook with love, always." I didn't need to read the name to know who it was. I felt it in my bones. Harper caught me looking once and smiled a little sadly. "That was my brother," she said softly. "He used to own a restaurant uptown, but things went bad. He moved away for a while. I try to honor what he taught me here." My throat went dry. I forced a nod. He must have been talented. He was, she said. Too trusting maybe, but he believed food could fix anything. I couldn't look her in the eyes after that. Not with that photo watching me like a mirror. Would you confess if your boss trusted you, but you were the reason her family lost everything? The longer I worked there, the harder it was to breathe because every part of the restaurant felt like it was built out of pieces of him. The spice jars labeled in his handwriting, the plating style that matched the photos I used to scroll past with envy, the staff dinners where Harper always toasted to new beginnings, like she was trying to rewrite history one meal at a time, and I was the ghost sitting at her table pretending I wasn't. The reason her brother had to start over, it was a slow Tuesday when I found it. I was closing up early. Harper had gone to a supplier meeting, and the front of house was empty, except for me wiping down tables. The office door was cracked open, and her laptop screen glowed faintly. I shouldn't have looked, but curiosity is a dangerous thing, especially when guilt already lives under your skin. I saw a browser tab open. Yelp page after Yelp page. Restaurant blogs, message boards, all tagged under the Mason table. Harper wasn't just reading them, she was replying to them carefully, thoughtfully, defending her brother's name under anonymous usernames. You don't know the full story, she'd written. People make mistakes, but he never stopped caring about his food or his team. Each comment was like a small act of resurrection, trying to rebuild a reputation that I had torn down with one careless review. I sank into the chair in front of the screen and stared at those words. My chest tight like confession was crawling up my throat. I wanted to type something back to tell her the truth, to say it was me. I'm the one who wrote it, but my fingers froze because the truth would ruin everything. Not just for me, but for her too. I clicked through the old reviews one by one, and there it was near the top. My review still there like a scar. 1 star for the chef who broke my heart. I read it again and it felt foreign. Childish, cruel. I could almost see the version of me who'd written it. The angry one who thought pain could be cleaned up by fire that night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed replaying every word Harper had said about forgiveness, about rebuilding, and I wondered what she'd do if she knew that the person she trusted to help run her new restaurant was the same one who'd burned the old one to the ground the next morning. Harper thanked me for locking up. She smiled, warm, easy, genuine, and I wanted to scream because kindness hurts more than revenge ever did. If you discovered your boss was secretly defending the person you destroyed, would you come clean? Or stay silent forever? There's always that one night in a restaurant that changes everything. Not with a bang, but with a whisper. The kind of night where you can feel something shifting underneath the clatter of plates and the hum of conversation. Like the floor knows before you do that something's about to crack. It was Friday service, fully booked reservations stretching past midnight, and Harper was glowing in that way. Only restaurant owners do when the night runs smooth. She'd brought in a few local journalists to try the new fall menu, her eyes shining with that quiet hope of someone who just wants a fair chance at redemption. She didn't know how literal that word was for me. Around 8:30, a man walked in alone, dressed like money and reputation, a food critic from Charleston Weekly, one of the biggest names in town. Harper straightened immediately and went to greet him, all grace and charm and practiced warmth. I stood near the pass, plating a dish and trying not to listen, but his voice carried sharp and confident. This place has been getting a lot of buzz, he said, especially considering who's running it. Harper smiled politely. Well, we like to think the food speaks for itself. Sure, he replied, but it's hard to ignore the legacy of the Mason table, your brother's old spot, right? I froze my hands hovering over the garnish. Harper's smile didn't falter, but I saw the flicker behind her eyes, that mix of pain and pride. Yes, that was his restaurant. It closed a while back, but he's doing okay. Now he's consulting out west. The critic leaned back a little. Shame about how it ended, though. That viral review. What was it called? 1 star for the chef who broke my heart? My stomach turned to glass. I felt heat rush up my neck. My fingers trembled so hard I almost dropped the plate. Harper let out a small laugh trying to play it off. People write things when they're emotional. The internet can be cruel, but my brother learned from it. Yeah, well, the critic said. Whoever wrote that review practically built their career off destroying his. I wanted to disappear right there behind the counter, crawl into the dish pit, and let the noise swallow me whole. Harper finished the conversation with perfect composure, but I could feel the silence between us later, like it had teeth after service. She lingered by the pass, cleaning a spotless counter, her reflection in the steel surface, calm but distant. Funny how one sentence online can change someone's whole life, huh? She said softly, not looking at me. I managed a nod, but my heart was pounding so hard it felt like a confession. If someone unknowingly reminded you of the worst thing you ever did, would you confess or pretend it didn't hurt? I came into work the next morning pretending nothing had shifted, but it was like walking through smoke, pretending there wasn't a fire somewhere nearby. Harper's voice still echoed in my head, that casual remark about how one sentence online could change a whole life. It didn't sound like suspicion. It sounded like someone probing a bruise to see how deep it went. The kitchen was unusually quiet that morning. No music, no chatter. Even the espresso machine sounded cautious. Harper was sitting at the corner table with her laptop open, a cup of coffee untouched next to her. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. Morning, Leah, she said. I wanted to go over next week's tasting menu with you. I nodded too quickly. Sure thing. I wiped my hands on my apron and tried to act normal, but when I sat down across from her, I realized she hadn't opened the menu document. The screen was blank. A word processor cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Actually, she began, I wanted to ask you something else. She leaned forward a little, her tone gentle but her gaze sharp. You said you used to write reviews right before you came here. My pulse jumped. Yeah, small ones. Nothing serious, just local spots. She murmured. Ever write about my brother's place? The air between us tightened like a string pulled too hard. I tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. No, I mean, I knew of it. Of course, everyone did, but I never wrote about it. She watched me closely the way people do when they already know the answer and are just waiting to see if you'll lie again. It's funny because I was cleaning out old files last night, and I found screenshots from that viral post. I hadn't looked at them in ages, but the writing, the tone felt familiar. The room felt too small. My skin prickled. She kept talking slowly, like she was walking through a minefield. The way you describe the food, the way you talk about betrayal, it reminded me of you, Leah, because you write the way you talk. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The guilt that had been sitting quietly in my stomach all these months finally stood up and looked me in the eye. I whispered, Harper. But she held up a hand. You don't have to say anything, not yet. I just need to know if I can trust you. Her voice cracked on that last word like she didn't want it to, and that hurt more than the accusation because beneath everything I could hear the trembling edge of someone who'd already forgiven me without knowing what for. I wanted to tell her everything right there, but my throat refused to open. Would you confess if it meant losing the only good thing you'd built from your biggest mistake? You can only bury guilt for so long before it starts seeping through the cracks of everything you touch. And that week it came out in the food. The dishes I plated looked perfect but tasted wrong. Harper noticed before anyone else. She didn't say anything, but I could feel her eyes on me every time I reached for the salt, or hesitated with the garnish like she was watching a secret unfold. Slowly, the review had started haunting me again. That one-star ghost I thought I'd left behind every time someone mentioned the Mason table. I heard the words I'd written echo in my head, the ones that went viral, the ones people shared like justice. But really, they were just pain disguised as honesty. The food tastes like love, cooked by someone who doesn't know how to say. That line had been quoted everywhere. I thought it was clever back then, raw and poetic, but now it just felt cruel because it wasn't about the food. It was about him and me and everything I didn't say. When he broke my heart, I didn't think it would ruin him. I just wanted to ruin the memory of us 2 nights after Harper's question. I stayed late to prep the sauces. I thought I was alone, but she walked in quiet and slow. Carrying 2 glasses of wine, she set one beside me. We need to talk, she said softly, and I swear my heart stopped. Harper. Don't, she said. Not angry, just tired. I looked up your old Yelp account. Leah, the username matches the one from the review. I closed my eyes. There was no point pretending anymore. The truth was out there between us, like spilled wine staining everything. I didn't mean to hurt you or him, I said, my voice trembling. I was just angry he cheated, and everyone loved his restaurant like he was some kind of saint. I didn't think anyone would care what I wrote. Harper took a long breath and sat on the counter beside me. You destroyed his career, Leah. You know that, right? He lost everything, investors, friends, even me for a while because everyone thought I helped you. I couldn't look at her. I wanted her to yell, to throw something, but she didn't. She just looked sad, like someone remembering a different ending that never happened. After a long silence, she said, he's moved on now, but seeing you here every day working so hard, it made me think maybe people deserve second chances. She paused. But you should have told me the truth. The words hit harder than anger ever could. Do you think people can truly forgive someone who destroyed something they loved, even if it wasn't on purpose? It happened on a Thursday, which somehow made it worse because Thursdays are supposed to be quiet in the restaurant world, that little calm before the weekend rush. But that morning, Harper walked in pale and silent, holding her phone like it was burning through her hand, and she didn't even have to say anything, because I knew before she opened her mouth, someone had found out about me. Someone had connected my old Yelp account to my name and posted it on a local gossip blog. The headline practically screamed, viral reviewer who destroyed the Mason table now works for his sister. And by noon, it had been reposted everywhere. The comments were brutal, half of them calling me a manipulative liar. The other half, accusing Harper of hiring me as revenge. It didn't matter that none of it was true. It didn't matter that I'd spent months rebuilding myself, because once the internet decides who you are, it doesn't care what's real. The staff started whispering. I caught bits and pieces behind the walk-in door. Is it true? How could she not tell us? No wonder Harper's been weird lately. And I just kept chopping onions, pretending the tears were from that, but they weren't. They were from the sharp ache in my chest that said, I'd done it again, hurt someone good. Without meaning to, Harper called a meeting that night before service. The whole team standing around the bar under those soft amber lights that used to make the place feel safe. She didn't look angry. She looked exhausted. She said, yes. It's true, Leah wrote that review. She's been honest with me about it now, and I want you all to know that she's not that person anymore. Her voice shook slightly, but she held her ground. The staff exchanged uncertain glances, and no one said anything for a long time. Finally, one of the line cooks muttered, the internet won't care about that. And Harper just nodded quietly. I know, but we do, and that's enough for me. I wanted to thank her, but the words wouldn't come, because it didn't feel like forgiveness. It felt like grace, and I didn't know how to hold that without breaking it. So I just stayed after everyone left, cleaning tables that didn't need cleaning, wiping glasses that were already spotless, trying to make sense of a world where the past doesn't stay buried, no matter how hard you scrubbed that night. As I walked home through the damp Charleston air, I checked my phone and saw that my DMs were full, people saying everything from, you ruined him, to you're brave for owning it. And I didn't know which one hurt more because both were true. If the internet turned your worst mistake into your identity, would you fight to change the story or disappear and start over? I didn't plan on seeing him again. Ever. Not in this lifetime. Not in this city that still tasted like him in the rain. But Harper texted me one afternoon saying he'd called wanting to meet. She said he deserved closure. I told her he deserved more than that, and she said, so do you. And that was that I met him at a cafe near the waterfront, the kind of place we used to go to before everything fell apart. And for a second, when I saw him sitting there with the late sunlight on his face, it felt like time folded in on itself, and I was 23 again. Heart too full of love and bad decisions. Hey, he said when I walked up. And it was strange because his voice hadn't changed. Not even a little, but mine cracked when I said his name, Caleb. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was an invisible wall between us, made of all the words we never said. So, he began stirring his coffee. You work for my sister now, huh? I nodded. I didn't know she was your sister when I took the job. Yeah, she told me, he said, looking down. Small world. Right. The silence between us felt heavy, like a storm cloud waiting to split open. Finally, I said it. I'm sorry, Caleb, for everything, for the review, for not coming to you first, for being angry and selfish and loud in the worst way. He looked up then, and I could see something flicker in his eyes. Something between pain and relief. You ruined me, Leah. You know that, right? You didn't just hurt me, you hurt my staff, my investors, everyone who believed in me. One post and it all burned. I know, I whispered. I thought it would make me feel better, but it didn't. It just followed me everywhere. He nodded slowly, taking it in, and for a long minute, neither of us spoke. The air was full of all the things we'd done wrong, but also of the strange peace that comes from finally saying the truth out loud. The thing is, he said finally, I don't hate you anymore. I did for a long time, but I get it. Now we were both trying to survive our own versions of heartbreak. I felt tears sting my eyes because forgiveness doesn't sound like a grand speech. It sounds like someone saying, I don't hate you anymore. In a quiet cafe, years after the wreckage when I left, he didn't hug me or stop me or ask for my number. He just said, take care, Leah. And it was enough because some goodbyes don't need a promise. They just need to end softly. If someone you loved destroyed you in anger but later apologized, would forgiveness ever feel enough? Or would you always keep a piece of that pain? A year later, the world moved on because that's what it does. It forgets what used to be breaking news and finds a new story to devour. But I was still in Charleston, still cooking still, showing up at dawn to smell the yeast and coffee and rain that seeped through the cracks of the old brick walls. And even after everything Harper kept me, she said she didn't believe in punishment. She believed in rebuilding. And sometimes I think that was the only reason I learned to forgive myself, because she never stopped believing I could. The internet had quieted. Mostly the comments faded into dust under newer scandals. But one night after closing, I sat at the bar, scrolling through the reviews for our restaurant. Every line felt like a mirror of my old self. People writing about food, as if it were life and love and therapy, all rolled into one. Some kind and some cruel, but all of them loud. I closed the app and opened a blank page, my fingers trembling, not from fear this time, but from something gentler, something like peace. I didn't write as the angry girl I was when I wrote about Caleb's place. I wrote as the woman who finally understood that words can feed or wound, and that the difference between them is intention. I wrote about how food is forgiveness in edible form, how kitchens are built on second chances, and how sometimes healing tastes like the thing you swore you'd never touch again. I called it the review that healed me. I didn't name the restaurant, or the people, or the past. I just wrote about the act of making something beautiful out of what's broken. And when I posted it anonymously again, I didn't expect anyone to care, but the next morning, Harper found me in the kitchen smiling through tears. Leah, she said, you did it again, except this time you saved something instead of destroying it. That article didn't go viral, not in the way the first one did, but it quietly spread. Shared by people who'd hurt and been hurt by people who needed to believe that we could rewrite our own stories. It didn't make me famous, it just made me feel clean. Like for the first time in years, I could breathe without tasting regret. Some nights I still think about Caleb wherever he is, maybe running a new kitchen, maybe just living quietly. I hope he saw it. I hope he knew it was for him, for Harper, for the version of me that didn't know better back then, and for the millions of people who hit post when they really needed to hit pause, and if words can ruin a life, maybe they can mend one too. I know because I wrote both. If you could write one message to heal a mistake you made online, what would it say?